If you love Final Fantasy VII as much as I do, you've probably thought a lot about how this game could have been remade. My imagination has gone wild thinking about this for over 20 years. And so I want to talk about how I would have remade it if I had unlimited resources to do so in any way that I could imagine. Now, before you jump to the comment section to tell me how insane some of this is going to sound, rest assured that I'm aware that a lot of this may well not have been possible when FF7 was in development, or even possible today. This video is more of an indulgence, a sort of thinking out loud about what my dream, ideal Final Fantasy VII Remake would look like. And even though a lot of this might seem crazy or impossible right now, I'm kind of hoping that one day the Final Fantasy series will go in this direction. In short, a man can dream. And so, without further ado, this is FF7R, how I would have done it. In my opinion, if you're going to remake such an iconic, successful classic, a game which touched the hearts of millions, you need to ask yourself why. What is the experience that you want to create for the gamer? And you need to seriously think about what made the original such an amazing game to begin with. Since 1997, I've played the original game countless times, and I've loved every single minute of it. When it first came out, I became obsessed with the game and discovering all of its secrets. It was a whole world that you could fully explore that felt boundless, full of mystery and adventure. You could catch, breed, and race chocobos. You could spend hours upon hours playing mini-games within the game. There was optional characters, endless loot, and there were all these little mysteries in the game too. Items that seemed to have no purpose, like the 1/35th scale soldier and the Masamune blade, all of which sparked many theories and myths from people all around the world, from getting Sephiroth as a playable character to bringing Aerith back to life. But last, and certainly not least, the characters, story, and music was truly awe-inspiring and beautiful, with themes that are appealing and socially and politically relevant today as much as they were back in 1997. To me, it's a timeless classic and a living, breathing thing. It's one of those rare gems in which the flaws are actually endearing. They're part of its character and charm, and they're part of what makes it so special. It's a perfect distillation of video gaming, storytelling, and art. And its value, influence, and cultural heritage, I would argue, is not just the product of its creators, but also the way in which its many characteristics coalesced and happened to resonate with so many people at that particular moment in time. To make any broad changes to its composition, to me, feels very misguided and a bit hubristic. And so, the prime objective of my remake would be to recapture that same sense of mystery and adventure, but equally as important, to do so without changing the game in any way whatsoever apart from expanding upon what was already there. Because the fact is that the world of Final Fantasy VII is already so large, both in the original game and in our imaginations. In my opinion, the only truly heartfelt love letter to fans all around the world is to recreate Final Fantasy VII in all of its original glory, keeping everything that it consisted of, with the only changes that you dare to make to be for the strict purpose of fleshing out its scale, its depth and detail, and to do so in the spirit of recreating that same sense of boundless adventure that we felt back in 1997, to recreate that same sense of a whole new gaming experience. This might seem like a tall order, and it is, but Final Fantasy VII is one of the greatest games that has ever been made, and its remake is undoubtedly one of the most anticipated games in all of video gaming history. In its day, Final Fantasy VII was the most expensive video game ever developed, and it was groundbreaking in numerous ways. And so, given how anticipated the remake is, given how easily this game will sell, even if it's a total pile of crap, no expense should be spared to ensure that it's as equally as revolutionary as the original that we fell in love with. One of the biggest problems that I've had with the Final Fantasy series since the inception of Final Fantasy X is that the worlds have felt kind of small and empty. Now, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed Final Fantasy X in a lot of ways. But that being said, something crucial has been missing. The games have looked larger and greater in scale. Everything has looked more real. But the fact is, most of the scenery cannot actually be explored, and it doesn't take you very long to feel it. To me, the worlds have just felt closed, and as a result, that sense of boundless adventure has been lost. FF12 kind of did a better job in this regard, although I don't think it was as good of a game as Final Fantasy X, but at least it tried to introduce an open world feeling back into the series. Unfortunately, the series regressed back to a more linear style game with Final Fantasy XIII, which was the worst Final Fantasy game I'd played so far and was the first one I didn't replay. Then Final Fantasy XV came along, and although that game lost me for a lot of other reasons, I was glad to see some open world introduced back into the series. This was always a really big part of what I loved about these games. There was always a whole world that you could explore, and it didn't just stop at land, you would take to the oceans and the skies. And without that, the games have just never felt right. So, if I was the head of this production team, we'd be taking a big page out of the books from teams at Hello Games and delivering a planetary-sized open-world Gaia that can be fully explored, similar to how it's been done in No Man's Sky. We don't need every inch of Gaia to be uniquely designed. We only need to invest serious detail into building all the major landmarks. The rest of the planet can be procedurally generated, based on the general outline and topography of the continents from the world map in the original game. All of the towns, cities, and various locations could be separately loaded as per usual, but similar to how it was done in Final Fantasy XII. This way, we can recreate every location as it was in the original game to appear in full scale, both within the maps themselves and when viewed from the open world, whilst maintaining the flexibility to not have to build and make accessible every inch of the extraordinarily large locations like Midgar. We could fill this world with new places to find, new dungeons and quests. It would also serve as the setting for sequels and prequels, DLCs centered around other characters in which we can delve deeper into their stories and the lore of Final Fantasy VII. Imagine riding around a life-sized Gaia on Chocobo back, or the hardy Daytona. Imagine exploring its seas with the tiny Bronco or the submarine. Imagine soaring through its skies in the high wind. This is what I'd have my team deliver. A game in which you will need to fast travel, but will often find yourself not wanting to. There's a lot of extra things that I think would be great to add to the remake. I would flesh out the Chocobo Square with more maps, some slightly more interesting racing mechanics and PvP, with the option to revert to classic racing mode for anyone who just wants to upclass their Chocobos. At the Wonder Square, I would add the PS4 version of the original Final Fantasy VII, which would be out of order until you complete the game. Once unlocked, if you complete the original game inside the remake, you'll unlock Sephiroth as a playable character outside of any story missions. Likewise, I would include Crisis Core at the Wonder Square, completion of which grants the player the option to use Zack. I feel that these kinds of additions are a really great way to pay fan service, but without breaking the game, as well as serving as a nod to all the theories that went around back in the day. At the Event Square, I would include the option to see Loveless. At the Battle Square, along with including the traditional battle format, I would add the option for the player to select and fight any monster from the game that they've encountered, as well as the option to fight in a party of 3, and I would add the ability to learn enemy skills in the battle arena. Another cool addition would be to reward 100% Battle Square completion by unlocking the capability to fight Sapphire Weapon, the opportunity of which we never got thanks to the Sister Ray. One area in which I thought the remake did a pretty good job was the battle system, with the only exceptions being that some of the boss fights dragged on a little bit and could have been a bit more exciting, and I think it would have been better if the ATBs of all party members charged at the same rate. Finally, I would incorporate breaking the HP and damage caps. These are just some of the ideas I've had over the years. I've probably had way more and I just can't remember them all. If you've had any ideas that you'd like to share, I'd love to hear about them in the comments section. Some final thoughts. If having the game look like this means that we have to live with a more linear, closed world, incomplete gaming experience, then it's not worth it. When it comes to JRPGs, any day of the week I would rather sacrifice graphics than gameplay. I mean, yes, if you can make things look more real and detailed, then awesome. But to me, that alone does not create a great gaming experience, and it's never made a boring game fun. To this day, the following scene of Cloud holding Aerith in his polygon arms, shaking in anguish, is still one of the most heart-wrenching moments that I've ever seen in any video game. And it perfectly exemplifies how much the way that it looks doesn't matter.